L.E.
All right. Officer O'Toole, if you would like to please present your statement. And if you're reading something, please read it slowly so that the court reporter can take down everything. And if this is going to be emotional for you and you need to stop, that's fine. I'd rather have you stop and take a breath than to not understand what you're saying. Okay?
First one will be for Officer Zajac. Your Honor, on the evening of December 16, 2024, my life could have been taken from me. Monday, December 16, 2025, at approximately 5:55 p.m. I was nearing the end of my shift. It had been a long day, and I was with Officer O'Toole, who was in Phase 3 of his field training. We had just cleared the Burnett County Jail after handling another incident, and were heading home for the night. As I pulled into my driveway, a call came over the radio, one that instantly made my heart sink. It was from St. Croix Tribal Dispatch, relaying a 911 call that it came in Burnett County Dispatch. Raina LaPointe, the mother of Monica, said Andrew was drunk and had locked Monica in the bathroom. He wouldn't let her out. I knew Andrew. I knew his history. I knew what he...
When a judge openly discusses security on the record, that's not routine, that's caution. It signals perceived risk. Courts don't add law enforcement presence casually. Something about this defendant's history clearly raised red flags.
Was capable of. A man I knew from prior violent incidents. Monica had a restraining order against him. I knew he was capable of harm. I knew she was in danger. And I knew that if I waited or checked off duty, as I was just minutes from doing, someone could have been hurt or worse, killed. What happened next changed the way I will respond to calls for the rest of my life. Monica had a protection order against him for a reason. He's a big man, aggressive when intoxicated. And Monica, significantly smaller, far more vulnerable. My instincts told me there wasn't time to wait. There wasn't just another domestic call. This was a situation that could turn deadly if we didn't act fast. I pulled out of my driveway and responded emergent. I wasn't going to let Monica become another name, another statistic, another woman failed by timing and hesitation. At 6:02 p.m., I arrived. A familiar sedan was parked in the driveway, Jamie Long's vehicle. She was sitting inside. As I walked past, she looked at me with wide, anxious eyes and said the word I'll never forget. Andrew's inside. When I arrived on scene, Officer O'Toole...
This is where sentencing truly shifts. Victim impact statements aren't about proving guilt. That's already done. They exist to humanize the consequences. And once they begin, the courtroom tone changes completely.
My trainee was right behind me. As I approached the split-level home, I saw Monica standing in the fire, terrified. The front door was wide open, and I could hear crashing, yelling, and chaos inside. Then the words no officer wants to hear. He's getting a knife. Seconds later, I saw Andrew sprint up the stairs into the kitchen, and then the crashing grew louder. He was tearing through drawers, and I knew exactly what was coming next. I secured Monica out of the house and turned to confront what I feared would be the final seconds of my life. Andrew came charging down the stairs, full sprint, straight at me, wielding a large kitchen knife. The only thing standing us was a storm door, already damaged, the latch broken. He began slamming the blade against the glass. Full force strikes, not tapping, not threatening. He was attacking, with clear intent to kill me. Each time his knife hit the glass, I braced for the pain to shatter. I could see the rage in his eyes. Not fear, not confusion, just raw, violent rage. Inches separate that knife from my body. I gripped the door with everything I had, knowing that at any moment it could give way. I tried to de-escalate. I tried to speak to him. There was no humanity in his response, only aggression. He was out of control. He was focused on ending my life. In that split-second moment, With a weapon pointed at me and no barrier worth trusting, I had to make a decision, use deadly force or try to reposition. I looked behind me and saw something that stopped me. Ran to the point, and a child near the stairs. I knew if I pulled my weapon and fired, I might hit one of them. So instead of protecting myself, I risked myself and I retreated to move to a tactical position. And just as I did, Officer O'Toole discharged his firearm, saving my life and possibly others. Afterwards, I helped render aid to Andrew, because that is our duty as officers. But it does not erase what happened. It does not take away the fear, trauma, or the reality that I came within inches of being stabbed to death while doing my job while protecting others. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Andrew Sonnenberg made the choice to turn a residence into a battleground, to turn a knife into a weapon, and to try to take a life that night, mine. Since then, I've struggled with the psychological toll of that encounter. The weight of having to make a life or death decision in a split second. The memories, that knife slamming into the glass, the look in his eyes, I still hear it, I still see it. I ask you to understand I wear a uniform, but I'm human. I have a family. I have people who expect me to come home. And on December 16th, at approximately 40 seconds after arriving at the scene, that was nearly taken from me by one man's violent and deliberate actions. The hardest part of the whole situation was it was a normal shift that day. I was just pulling into my residence, getting ready to see my family, when I backed out of my driveway. I can't help but think I didn't call my wife or my kids when doing so. And if I got killed that night, the last thing they would have heard, the last thing they would have seen was my squad leaving the driveway, pulling in. No goodbye, no I love you, nothing. Just taillights. The part that hurts the most, knowing what they would have felt, they would have had a lifelong sadness that wouldn't go away. They would always have those questions of what if, hold them accountable.
Think about this moment. The law draws a hard line here. Once a reasonable officer believes lethal force is imminent, the legal analysis changes instantly. This isn't theory. It's seconds, instincts, and survival.
Not just for what he tried to do to me, for the chaos, the trauma, the danger he brought into that home that night. To Monica, to the child, and to my family. I'm asking, no, I'm pleading, for you to impose a maximum sentence allowed under law. Andrew didn't just break the law that night. He broke a woman's sense of safety. He shattered trust, and he showed complete disregard for the protection order meant to keep Monica safe. His actions were calculated, violent, and terrifying. Monica could have been seriously injured or worse. The fear in her mother's voice, the scene we walked into, the trauma that Monica will carry. None of it will be undone. He was proven time and time again that he's a danger, and to anyone who tries to protect her. The only way to ensure Monica's safety and to send a message that this kind of abuse will not be tolerated is to hold him fully accountable. Please, Monica, please, for Monica, for her family, for every victim who pleads for the protection that comes too late, give Andrew the maximum sentence. Officer Mike Zajac, badge number 45.
Mr. O'Toole, yours, please.
Yep.
And again, if you need to take a second, you may do so.
On December 16, 2024, the day that changed everything. It's my first day of faith.
I'm just going to ask you to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
You read Officer Zajac. Very slow and good. So please do that with yours.
Thank you. A day that changed everything. I was in my first day of Phase 3 FTO. I was so new that I didn't even know if I had my badge on correctly. 6:02 p.m., my career changed. My family changed. I changed.
As much time as you need. It's a little bit more difficult, I'm sure, reading your own versus somebody else.
I was on the phone with my wife when the call of domestic in progress came out. I told my wife that I loved her and I would be home soon. Never did I think that was almost the last words I could tell her.
Officer O'Toole, you may take time.
Never did I think I wouldn't be able to tell her I was okay. How much I loved her, and how I almost didn't come home. Being so new, I showed up to the wrong address. I thought I was going to get made fun of for it. Little did I know that mistake most likely saved my life. Mike and I arrived at the same time, hearing screaming of "he's got a knife." When I noticed Andrew coming down the stairs, knife raised above his head, coming for Mike and I. My only thought going through my head was my family and my partner's family. How could I explain to them that I failed in doing my duties of keeping my partner safe? I couldn't let it happen. Andrew, even as you were laying on the ground, you still showed no remorse, no care, no regret for what you were putting your kid and family through. You will never change. You refuse to take accountability for your actions. If it wasn't for Mike's bravery of holding the door, even in the face of imminent death, everything would have been different. If it wasn't for my first FTOK teaching me and preparing me for my career ahead.
I'm going to guess by FTO you mean field training officer?
Yes, my field training officer, Jay Park. Teaching me and preparing me for the career ahead, everything would have been different. If it wasn't for me going to the wrong house, everything would have been different. Even though I protected people and did my job and came home, it has not been without its challenges. I've spent many sleepless nights replaying the night of December 16th in my head and wondering what my future will look like. That my family and I have shed many tears for an unavoidable situation that could have cost my life or my partner's life. When people say life flashes before your eyes, I never believed them until that day. What I saw that day was my wife in hands with a little girl. I knew if I didn't stop Andrew, I'd never get to see this future with my wife. I believe that was God telling me what he had planned for me. When I was at my lowest, I told my wife I couldn't see through this, and she asked me if I could see my next step, and said, "Just take it. I will be there to catch you if you fall." That's what true love is. That night, I had to start my recovery journey. Through that, I got adopted into a new family, a law enforcement family. Family that checked on me continuously throughout my journey of coming back to the job. Family that has my back until the very end. A family that never let me be alone in my darkest hour. I can't thank the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office, St. Croix Tribal, Siren, Webster, and Grantham Police Departments enough for their continuous support in my journey. Holly Hicks has helped me ground myself in the support that I've received in focusing on the future ahead. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong. This is what I'm meant to be. I would do it all over again for my brothers and sisters in blue. I will keep doing it because it's my job to make sure everyone goes home safe. In the words of Mark Peterson, in the end, all that matters is I did the right thing. All I ask is that justice be served in a way that reflects the seriousness of what my family and I endured.
Thank you, Officer O'Toole. All right, Mr. Schmidt. Argument and sentencing recommendation.
Thank you. This segment in here, I'm going to switch to playing some video footage for the court. I'll let the court know when I'm going to do that. I've already set it up with the clerks prior to the hearing. State's recommendation here is going to be towards the high end of the court's PSI recommendation. I'm going to be recommending 7.5 years initial confinement and 4 years extended supervision, which is the top end of that.
All right.
The driving factors of my recommendation are, I think, in order that I think the court should prioritize them, which is incapacitation, specific deterrence, rehabilitation, and general deterrence. I think it's most appropriate for me to start with my argument based off of presentation by the officer here, reading Officer Zajac and Officer O'Toole's statements, by emphasizing how really dangerous this offender is. You heard some of that alluded to by Officer Zajac's statement. His criminal history is just riddled with either dealing convictions or battery convictions or read-ins. Most people who were talked to by both PSI writers, both the one who prepared the sentencing memorandum for the defense, as well as the DOC agent who prepared the courts, reference multiple incidences across Mr. Sonnenberg's life in particular, where Mr. Sonnenberg was in possession of knives and the need to disarm them. That's been like a recurring thing mentioned in those PSIs. The instant case involves him stabbing at and chasing 2 police officers before they really even had a chance to say much of a word to him. It was just wanton, pointless, and potentially lethal. That's where I should start with it, the actual fact pattern here, and the dangerousness of it. 2 tribal police officers were called with what initially sounded like a domestic call, an unwanted person call, a violating a restraining order call. We've heard some description of it already. As they approached the building, dispatch warned them over their radio of an ongoing shouting and crashing, as well as mention of a knife. As they approached the front door, Monica Martinson left the residence while warning the police that Sonnenberg was getting a knife. As she exits, when you watch Officer Zajac's body cam, Andrew Sonnenberg is at the top of the stairs, both knives in his hands. 2 of them. Officer Zajac closes.
This is sentencing philosophy in plain English. The prosecutor is telling the judge, this isn't just about punishment. It's about protecting the public and preventing this from ever happening again. Notice how rehabilitation comes after incapacitation.
I think it would be fairly characterized as a rather flimsy storm door as Sonnenberg barrels down the stairs and charges at the door and collides with it full force in the momentum of charging down a flight of stairs. He changes his grip on the knives to get a firmer grip on the largest knife and to adjust it for a downward thrust towards the glass pane of the storm door. He swings in particular directly in the direction of where Officer Zajac is behind the door, bracing it with his foot to prevent it from opening. To prevent Mr. Sonnenberg from gaining access to himself as well as to Monica, who had just left the building. Zajac moves back from the knife thrust, moving back from the door, and immediately Sonnenberg bursts through the door with both knives, one in each hand, charges at the police, and is quickly stopped by the fast actions of Officer O'Toole. Because there was so much talk about this incident in the PSI, that's why I think the court really, to understand the dangerousness, as well as I think the fastness of it, how much happens in such a fast period of time, I'm going to need to play it for the court. I'm going to be playing a segment of this from both Zajac's perspective as well as O'Toole's. It's going to be less than 1 minute video from each of their body cams. That's how much happened in such a short period of time. When we do suppression motions, when we analyze constitutional issues, something the Supreme Court really tells us is to consider the fast need to respond and make a decision, the snap judgments law enforcement needs to make for safety reasons every day. And I think this really emphasizes why that exists, why that's a matter of law, not just a matter of fact. I want the court to watch for the things I just described. I want the court to watch in particular for this one. So I'm going to start that now.
Before he does that, my client would like to leave the courtroom for the video playing.
All right. Law enforcement comfortable with that and bringing him to the elevator or elevator room? All right, thank you. Then we can remove Mr. Sonnenberg for the playing of the video portion.
No, this is my class.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I hear a lot of screaming on the phone now. Get out of the house. She says he's grabbing a knife. Hey! Andrew, stop. 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 Just, hey, stop. What I got left?
One more time.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I hear a lot of screaming on the phone now. Get out of the house. She says he's grabbing a knife. Hey! Andrew, stop. 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 Just, hey, stop. What I got left? He says he's grabbing a knife.
Mike, you hear that?
Get out. Andrew, stop. 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 Just, hey, stop.
What I got left? What I got left?
Stop, fire, stop.
When I watch that body cam footage, a number of questions race across my mind every time I watch. First, what if Officer Zajac did not retreat when he did? What if that storm door panel, that flimsy glass there, what if that broke? What if Officer O'Toole did not fire and also chose to retreat? Would they have been running away from Mr. Sonnenberg? Would they have gotten away? What if the police were 5-10 minutes later on arrival? Would Sonnenberg have gotten out the knives anyways with Rana and Monica? He has a history of violence in particular with Monica. With what Mr. Sonnenberg consumed, according to the PSI, the vodka, the cocaine, the fentanyl, the methamphetamine, there's no way to know. I don't think he could possibly know, and that is terrifying. For Monica, for his daughter, police, for literally anyone in the community who might have been coming into contact with him, he was doing that. His own family has complained that they've had to disarm him of knives themselves. This is a recurring problem. Just for those reasons, probation, where the court has to start with every sentencing, cannot be the answer. Andrew Sonnenberg cannot be safely in the community. So let's talk about rehabilitation here for a second, because both PSIs talk about rehabilitation. There's a lot of conversation about traumatic brain injury and injuries he suffered from terrible car crashes back 20 years ago, as well about his substance abuse. He himself sources all of his violence, all of his criminal history back to substance abuse. I have mixed feelings about that in this case, because yes, he has the memory issues and the traumatic brain injury from the car crash. And yes, he's got the substance abuse issues. But when you read the PSI, both Sonnenberg and his family seem to have been very acutely aware of this. They've known about these issues for a long time. And they've persisted. It doesn't matter how many terms of probation he's been on, how many sentences he's gotten. He's been evaluated up and down the wazoo by state and federal authorities for mental health and AODA. Decades of that kind of treatment, both on supervision and in a confined setting, has been to no avail. The awesome resources available through the federal system were not enough. They even had a reentry program, something that, quite frankly, would be a dream in Wisconsin, that Sonnenberg once failed out of and the second time just refused to do. The reasons I have mixed feelings about the rehabilitation for this fact pattern is because, yes, you could look at Mr. Sonnenberg and say to yourself, if we can just get the right treatment for the traumatic brain injury and the memory issues, we know the treatment paradigms for that. There's therapies, there's oversight. Just treat the AODA issues. Then if these really are the causes of all his behaviors, then that should work. That should end the criminal behavior. should end the pattern of undesirable behavior. Look at that as a double-edged sword, because we can't have the arrogance to say it's going to work this time. Madness is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. The expectation should be, regardless of what the sentence is today, if we're just using logic and science and prediction and believing in the assessment rules, Sonnenberg is likely to behave again, is likely to be violent because of this history, because of the history of non-success rehabilitation. And because when you look at issues like that, when a person has a 20, 25-year history of abusing substances and getting violent, it really brings to mind why in 2013 the legislature got rid of the voluntary intoxication instruction, because they just thought it was a bad idea. If you read the legislative materials for when they did that, it doesn't make any sense for a person to be alleviated from responsibility from choosing to use a substance that causes criminal behavior. Yes, there's the substance abuse disorder. It's harder for them, but there are a lot of people who are alcoholics, who are addicted to controlled substances, don't have these issues. They don't have this level of burden on society. Because when it gets down to it on this one, the risk that, say, a drunk driver has to society is the speculative risk of maybe they'll hit someone. Or the risk of someone who is addicted to drugs might be maybe if they have a history of stealing, they might go out and steal. The risk of Mr. Sonnenberg is different than a lot of other people. The risk is of death and great bodily harm to others. Him working himself up into a state where he can be that dangerous to people. The instant offense, the elements of the offense, is literally that. It's risk, substantial and unreasonable risk of death or great bodily harm. That's what he did, and what caused it was him hanging out with a friend and consuming a large amount of alcohol and drugs, working himself up to violate a restraining order with his acts. It's what he was trying to do when police just arrived and he attacked. That's why in this case, the solution has to be prison, and it has to be a substantial amount of prison. Prison is the only place where treatment can be safe for the community. Treatment is necessary in a confined setting here. I think even beyond that, I think not just treatment, I think Mr. Sonnenberg needs a controlled environment where he can't be a risk of death or great bodily harm to others. He can practice the sobriety that's supposed to come after treatment. If he can't accomplish that in prison, he's not going to accomplish it outside. There was some suggestion in the PSI with statements from Sonnenberg and some other people that he shouldn't be sent to prison because he'll just use drugs in prison, which is really counterintuitive, because if a person is going to use drugs in prison where drugs are less available, where there's less control over, where there's less drugs available and more control over them, then they're obviously going to be greater risk of using drugs in the community. Just the incident case here involved polysubstance abuse. The community needs Mr. Sonnenberg to get treatment in a confined setting and practice that sobriety for a substantial period of time before he gets released. And prison is the place where that can happen. Because when Mr. Sonnenberg's out in the community, it's easy for him to get controlled substances, even if he were on probation. It would just be a simple drive to a liquor store or using old connections to get controlled substances. And when he uses those, he becomes unpredictable and potentially lethally dangerous to the community. Prison is a consequence, you can tell from the PSI, that is extremely negative to him, meaning he really doesn't want it, so it also has a strong deterrent. Finally, I have to speak to gravity of the offense, which is, it's different than the other things I've described so far. I've argued for incapacitation in the sense that the more time Mr. Sonnenberg is away from the community, the more time it's protected because of the unpredictable, dangerous nature of him using controlled substances, the impracticality of preventing him from using controlled substances while on supervision. Specific deterrence, the long prison sentence, ratcheting up consequences. Rehabilitation, where it's a double-edged sword, where it seems if you could treat some of his underlying conditions, substance abuse, the traumatic brain injury, he might be better, but lack of success over 20 years would suggest it's perhaps hoping a bit too much to think that's likely to happen. And finally, the general deterrence, which ties into what I'm going to say about gravity of the offense. This is a person who charged the police with knives before the police had done or really said anything. The court just watched the body cam I played. The officers just arrived there. They hadn't even had contact with Mr. Sonnenberg. They're warned over the radio of shouting and knives. They hear shouting. They hear Monica leave the residence and mention knives. And Sonnenberg appears at the top of the stairs with one knife in each hand, just charges them. No discussion. No, let's talk about this. You heard Officer Zajac try to talk with Mr. Sonnenberg at the door after he charged and started slamming the knife into it to no avail. It was completely pointless, reasonless, potentially lethal violence. That demands treating this with high gravity. It might be the police were charged at because they are police. They were targeted for that reason, that identity. There's some stuff in the PSIs to suggest that. Comments from Mr. Sonnenberg about being paranoid about the police and them targeting him and complaining about the jail. Perhaps even more terrifying is the possibility that Sonnenberg would have charged anyone, as I described before, concerned neighbor, different family member, Jamie Long, who drove him and didn't think any of this was a good idea to begin with. Someone who wouldn't have a gun with them or have training about what to do in these scenarios or not be his relative to be able to, hey, Andrew, let's just talk it out. Just give me the knife. Someone who wouldn't be able to do that. What happens if that's just a concerned neighbor? The risk here was of substantial. These officers, with the suddenness of what Sonnenberg had thrust them into, were clearly affected. You could see the reaction on Officer O'Toole's face. The emotion he had was raw and genuine. There's no doubt he suffered trauma from this incident. You could feel it in the words written by Officer Zajac. He was actually explicit about that. All of this came from what you have to determine at the end of the day. So we believe in freedom of will in Western tradition, a deliberate decision to consume large amounts of substances, consuming alcohol before working him up to violate that restraining order. He did traumatize the police. He could have traumatized Monica. He might have traumatized his own daughter, who was there and present in the house when this happened. Officer Matthew here today helped come afterwards and take care of that. Gravity in this case is too much. This offender is too likely to recidivate violently. It was just nonsense that the Compass assessment said medium violent offense here. The court saw that that was not medium violent offense. Community has to be protected. Sonnenberg needs treatment in a confined setting, and he's already done so much programming that I think the goal of treatment in a confined setting isn't just to do the treatment and bounce him out as soon as possible, but also to make sure he stays there and can practice sobriety to show he's earned it. He can't maintain sobriety in prison. He's obviously not going to do so out of prison. Finally, other people out there need to know there will be severe consequences from attacking the police in this manner. There was no reason for this. The court saw them. General deterrence is needed. 7.5 years of initial confinement is needed. I'd ask the court to follow my recommendation. Thank you, and then I'll submit this at the end.
All right, thank you. Ms. Landgraf, I'm now going to turn to you for your recommendation.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not going to underscore the gravity or the seriousness of the offense. I think we all know how serious this was. The defense understands that this is a prison sentence. I heard the DA say that Mr. Sonnenberg doesn't want to go to prison. He's trying to not to go to prison. that's actually not the case. During our negotiations, we actually offered to resolve with a joint recommendation for a prison sentence. Mr. Sonnenberg knows that this is a prison sentence. When I started representing him in this case, he actually refused to look at the discovery. He was very focused on his hand and the trauma that he went through for being shot, because just like Officer Sajak said in his statement that he's not just a uniform, he's a person too. Mr. Sonnenberg is not just a uniform, a jail uniform, he is a person too. It's easy to sit here and say, what if this would have happened? What if that didn't happen? If whatever happened, there would be more serious charges. There would be different charges. That's not the charges that's before the court, though. Luckily, the only person who was physically harmed was Mr. Sonnenberg. He has long-lasting effects. He's never been shot before, and he and I have spent significant amounts of time talking about how the shooting really changed his perspective mentally. This was a whole different ball game for him. I have hope and faith that this incident was so life-altering that it will have an effect to have him make the changes that he needs to make. The PSI and I believe the DA both talked about how he immediately armed himself with a knife. PSI said that he went into prison mode by grabbing a knife. Mr. Sonnenberg was a teenager when he was sent to 12 years in the federal prison for dealing drugs in the tribal community with his family. His family was the one that was doing that. He was in and out of foster care for his childhood. He didn't finish school in his childhood. I don't know what society can expect from someone who has that kind of upbringing. He never had a role model in his family. Most of his family members, I think there were 13 or 14 of them that were sentenced to prison along with him. So he comes out of 12 years in prison for drugs. And while he was in federal prison, he carried a shank. I mean, was he supposed to? No, but I don't know what goes on in federal prison, but apparently that is what goes on in federal prison. And I think we can see that clearly play out if somebody is so messed up on drugs that the first thing they need to do is grab a knife and arm themselves. As the DA said, there was prior incidences with knives. And I agree that this has been a long time with these same issues and that his family knows about it. In fact, his family contacted law enforcement 3 days before this happened because Mr. Sonnenberg was kind of out of control, acting crazy. He armed himself with a knife. Mr. Sonnenberg told the police, I want to go to jail. I want to go where it's safe. I think that the alternate PSI kind of talks about that a little bit more, and that's some of the charges that he's facing over in Polk County still. But not that it underscores the importance or the seriousness of his actions on the 16th. I mean, his family did they did contact law enforcement. They took him to jail for the night. I know we can't change the criminal justice system into a mental health system overnight. But this is what happens when we don't have the tools in our society to handle situations like this. At this time, he was not on bond. He was not on supervision. So there was nothing over him that could have, held him in jail right away. So prevent the incident on the 16th from happening. Something that struck me that Deputy O'Toole said, he said, Andrew, you will never change. You never take responsibility. He is here. He took responsibility. He did not ask to go to trial. I believe he did with his previous attorney. He wanted to go to trial, but I know that before I became his attorney, he never looked at the discovery because he didn't want to. And when I told him that I would have to withdraw from representing him because I can't quickly go to trial if I know my client hasn't seen the evidence that the state has against him, he reluctantly watched the video. And from that second, his mood and his attitude about this case, 180-degree change. Many of our conversations end like this, or we have to stop, because he really is remorseful. He really couldn't believe that Officer Sajak was there to help him. I don't think that he has a very good impression of law enforcement, unfortunately, and given his background and family involvement with law enforcement, I can see how that would be a product of that. But I literally physically saw the change in Mr. Sonnenberg, and I have every single time since I've met with him after he watched that video. And I think in the PSIs, he even tells PSI that, well, my attorney showed me the video. I didn't know the officers were there to help me. He pled guilty to a very serious charge, and he is here, and he is going to accept whatever the court deems is appropriate for him. Will the court be justified in giving him a max sentence? Sure. But Mr. Sonnenberg is not somebody who had the tools that most people have growing up or even in their adult life. I'm not saying that he deserves a break, but I think that we need to recognize that and consider that. I disagree with him being evaluated previously in the federal and state systems. I've never seen a copy of evaluation. My client says that he was not evaluated before, so I think that a proper full psychological evaluation is absolutely necessary here. I don't know how far the court's authority can go with ordering a TBI evaluation. Mr. Sonnenberg, after we discuss the PSIs, he realizes how important that would be to have evaluated, and he is going to work with the tribe once he is released to get that evaluation if he cannot get it sooner or in prison. Like I said, the defense is expecting a prison sentence, and we're asking for 6 years, 3 years initial confinement followed by 3 years extended supervision. Thank you.
Thank you. Sonnenberg, I'm now going to turn to you. If you wish to provide a statement today, you may do so. You are not required to. This is your only opportunity to tell the court anything about this matter, this case, you, etc., that you wish to let me know before sentencing. Also, your opportunity to correct anything that you may have heard that was stated incorrectly, or anything in these two documents in front of you.
First off, I'd like to say sorry to law enforcement officers. Because I remember that night, as the video shows, my kid's mom came up first and said my daughter's still in there. Before that, the cops were yelling my name to help, help. Didn't like trauma, you know. During my incarceration, the feds indulged in drugs. There's more drugs in prison, so found. But they changed me, man. And then another incident happened when my daughter was at school. She acted up and said what I said that night. God, I don't know. That's what made me change from that before I seen the video. I'm sorry for the law enforcement officers going through what they're going through. Yeah. I know I need a psych eval for myself, for my family, my daughter. I'm not that type of dude. Drugs and alcohol were in my system. I lost my brother and my cousins. I still haven't grieved for my mom yet. I lost her in the hole. Yeah. That's why I pleaded guilty for video show the cops were trying to help me. I didn't know. I black out. Sometimes I can't, I got short-term memory loss, you know. But I know that it wasn't right. Sad for causing what they got to go through in life with their kids, as well as me, my family, my kids. Sorry for the court for this. I know it's their job to label me as I'm not that type of dude. I was out there singing, helping the kids. I never got even a psychic valve in the feds, period. I didn't get no help. In the feds, you pay money to get certificates from the dudes that are running it. So where is the help? You know? Just pay through your things to get certificates. It's just rugged and mean. And USP Florence, United States Penitentiary in Florence, I've never been to prison in my life. And they sent me there. Right when I get there, they give me, it's called a bone crusher. I didn't know that. So you gotta live with this daily. I was like, what? All right, then I just sat back and watched it. I was there. And going through that throughout my beard, not getting any help in my head because I was in a coma for a long time. First never looked at it. Never got second valve or nothing. Just threw me out with the wall. I'm sorry for this nightmare and law enforcement officers. I'm not that type of dude. Sad. I'm dead. I'm dead, you know. I want to seek help for myself. The only one can do it is myself. It's for me, my family, my kids. Hopefully, come on, you guys come to power. Make you want to yourself. That's what I do, man.
Thank you. The court watched 2 body cam videos, the footage of what happened that night from the 2 officers' different perspectives. They are completely different videos. They're the same thing, same time, happened at the exact same moment the videos were recorded. They were from 2 separate people. Now, had I watched only Officer Zajak's video, it doesn't look as serious. You hear Officer Zajak in a very calm voice trying to bring you down, Mr. Sonnenberg, trying to de-escalate the situation. And from Officer Zajak's body cam, you see you coming down with the knife and then beating on the door. And then all of a sudden, you see Officer O'Toole raise his weapon and shoot. That body cam, that was all the court had to view. It doesn't come across as serious. Until you watch the different perspective from Officer O'Toole. Then you get a complete picture of what happened. You see Officer O'Toole approaching the house, hearing from dispatch he's got a knife, walking up, seeing Officer Zajak at the door, calmly talking, trying to talk you down and de-escalate. We have a clear view, a clear picture of you with the knife. You're beating the door with your body. You take the knife in your hand and you stab the door multiple times. And in the video, you see just how weak and flimsy that door is.
This is why body cam footage matters. One angle can mislead. Two angles tell a story. Courts don't just watch video. They analyze perspective, timing, distance, and reaction. And here, those seconds decide everything.
It's a cheap door. And you see beating the knife on the glass door, and that the door keeps trying to give way. And you not de-escalate. You in fact escalate even more. And you push through the door. Officer Zajac then has to run back because you are coming outside of the door with the knife in. Then Officer O'Toole reacts and responds. Split second, he has to think and evaluate the situation. And he shoots. Not to kill, to disarm. You see that you were shot in the arm. You could have been shot dead. I'm not an officer. I don't know what they're trained to do. I'm going to tell you what I'm trained to do with my weapon. If I'm in that situation, is shoot to kill. You could have died. Officer Zajac and Officer O'Toole could have died or been seriously injured that day. Without Officer O'Toole's body cam footage, you don't get a complete picture. What happened? Because there was a domestic in progress. Domestic in progress. And those words come over, I'm sure, an officer's radio. They hear that. Just as I heard from the officer's statement, domestic in progress. Heart starts pumping and escalating. Faster and faster you get. A rush of heat through your body. Anxiety raises. Fear exists. Yet the officer needs to perform his duty, his job, and to protect. The officer does get to have those feelings at that moment. But it doesn't mean they don't exist. Officer Toole at least got the moment right before to walk in to call his wife. Could have been the last time he called his wife. Domestic in progress. We have MM, former significant other, who has a domestic abuse injunction, restraining order against you. We have your 6-year-old daughter and RL, mother of MM. There could have been far more deaths than that. Domestic in progress. There has been a significant increase in officer-related shootings and or officer deaths responding to domestic in progress. And it's uncalled for. I have 2 officers provided statements. And then I heard in one of them that the officer is human. They have feelings. That's true. Sometimes people forget that because they wear the uniform, they wear the badge, they have the gun, they have the taser. Sometimes the public sees them as robots. People who should just respond and act without thought. To take all of the criticism, to take the spit, to take the urine, to take the punching, to take the hitting, to take the knives and the guns. Officers are human. They have a job to do, and they did it that night. They protected, they served that night. But for the fact that they are there, we have a woman and a child that are safe. The officer's son, Officer cried. You don't see that very often. Officers experience trauma, just like everybody else. They feel pain, emotionally and physically. They are victims too. And when I heard your statement, and I heard the argument from your attorney about your perspective of what happened, I understand and I hear from your perspective what happened that night. That you were shot in the hand, you were shot through other places, that it was very traumatic for you, that it totally changed perspective, that you're trying to heal from that night. There's nobody to blame for what happened that night. There's nobody to blame for your injuries but you. Every single step that was taken that day, every single action, by inhaling the substances, by drinking the intoxicants, going over to a place you knew legally were not permitted to be, near people you were not permitted to be around, was calculated by you. Every single thing that happened that night, including getting shot in the arm, caused by you. I've had the pleasure of sentencing Mr. Sonnenberg a handful of times. First time Mr. Sonnenberg was in front of me, I remember distinctly and clearly. He was just released from either an extended supervision stay or a prison sentence. Just out, got into some trouble. Then he found out and discovered he was
This case asks a brutal question. When substance abuse, past trauma, and personal responsibility collide, where does accountability begin? And who bears the cost when it's delayed too long? 44633.